And before we get started with the spiritual mind treatment, we do a land acknowledgement. And I am an enrolled member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, which is located in Oklahoma. And we include this land acknowledgement in our DEI webinar. And it is the first step in an active process to heal the wounds of colonization and to move forward with integrity. So I live in Riverside, California, so I will name the people where I'm living. I acknowledge the Cahuilla people in whose unceded territories I reside. I honor them and respect their rights to live as free people, to have all the rights as a sovereign nation, their right to practice their religion, to develop their economies, to raise their children, to educate their children with full knowledge of who they are and their unique histories. I acknowledge this land and this people with my full support and love. We have people from many different places. So if you do not know the Indigenous people from your area, you can go to the link that is in the chat to find out what people live in your area. And please put those in the chat and we get to see them as they come up and we get to see where you are as well. We do this with the intention of understanding the longstanding history that brought you to reside on this land and to understand your place in that history. We are still living with these effects, and we recognize that these effects of colonization still marginalize and erase Indigenous peoples. Remember that Indigenous people are present everywhere. They are not in the past. And take some time to learn about the people in your particular place where you live and the Indigenous people who are living right next door to you. Oh, and I'm seeing someone from Philadelphia with the Lenape, and I am also Lenape. So I am turning this over now to Reverend Darrell to do our spiritual mind treatment.
Thank you. So as we acknowledge this land, this deep history that is here, let us acknowledge the even deeper history of spirit by taking a moment to come together in spiritual mind treatment. What I recognize that lives, dwells, and has its being in all lands, those seen and unseen, is the living spirit itself. It is my life and it is the life of everyone on this call. It is the life of everyone that is watching this recording. It is the life of everyone, no matter where they are. There is but one life. That life is God's life. It is whole, perfect, and complete. And we celebrate the diverse nature of this spirit. May it be celebrated tonight in this conversation. May this be a safe place. May the digital connections be easy. May our hearts and ears be open to receive what we need to receive, and may we be able to speak what we need to speak. I bless this very time, bestowing prosperity on it. May it be fruitful and good for all. Blessing our guest speakers, blessing our technology team, blessing the committee as they organize, blessing all of you who have come and taken time out of your evening to grow in your understanding. May this time be great for all. And so we surrender and let it be, and so it is.
So it is.
You want me to take it from here, Darrell?
Yes, I'll pass it on to our committee member, Sheila Alexander-Reid, who is hosting tonight's webinar.
Well, thank you, first of all, for that great prayer. And thank you for everyone, for showing up That's really the hardest part, is just showing up. And I'm honored to be here today as a committee member of the DEI committee. And I'm also honored to be here as the partner of our guest, Aishah Shahidah Simmons. And for those of you who think maybe I selected her because she is my partner, let me read you her bio so you can understand why she is the guest. April, by the way, is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And when it comes to that subject matter, I thought we should have a subject matter expert. Aishah Shahidah Simmons is a Black feminist, lesbian survivor, healer, Buddhist practitioner, mindfulness meditation teacher, and award-winning filmmaker and author. Both her groundbreaking 2006 release film, No, the Rape Documentary, and her 2020 Lambda Literary Award-winning anthology, Love with Accountability, Digging Up the Roots of Child Sexual Abuse, break silences, offer healing paths for trauma, and provide distinct visions for compassionately disrupting the inhuman epidemics of childhood and adult sexual violence. Since June of 1995, Aishah has screened her work, guest lectured, and facilitated over 400 workshops and dialogues to racially and ethnically diverse audiences across the North American continent and in several countries in Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. Venues range from colleges and universities, high schools, conferences, and international film festivals to rape crisis centers, battered women's shelters, community centers, juvenile correction facilities, non-government and government-sponsored events. Additionally, she has been an artist in residence and served on the faculties of the University of Chicago, Temple University, Scripps College, Spelman College, my alma mater, I must say, Williams College, the University of Pennsylvania, the Weekly Dharma Gathering Platform, and Barre Center for Buddhist Studies. She is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including the 2023 Spider Weave Flow Fund Grant, the 22-23 Changemaker Authors Cohort Fellowship. She's also a 2020 Lambda Literary Awardee and a 2020 Soros Media Fellowship Awardee and a 2016 to 2019, I should say, Just Beginnings Collaborative Fellowship, and finally the 2019 Breakthrough U.S. Activist Impact Award winner. So as you can see, she's very accomplished. Presently, Aishah is a visiting mindfulness meditation teacher at Morgan State University, where she is teaching the course Heart Sanctuary, Cultivating Loving Kindness, Compassion, Vicarious Joy, and Balance from Within. Simultaneously, she's writing her next manuscript, Love, Justice, and Dharma, a spiritual memoir that is the capstone to the trilogy of work that began with No, the Rape Documentary. And now based in Washington, D.C., Aishah meditates, writes, teaches, travels the world, speaks on the internet, and also in person all over about healing from childhood and adult sexual trauma, non-carceral accountability for harm, Dharma, and mindfulness. She is represented by Danielle Chiotti at Upstart Literary Crow and Jean Kaniani at Speak Out. She is on social media at AfroLes, and I can't begin to tell you how proud I am to have her here with us today. Welcome, Aishah.
Thank you, Sheila. Thank you. Really appreciate the invitation and happy to be able to co-present with you, since we are, especially now in this time when we're in different cities.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, folks. I'm in Philadelphia and Aishah is in DC, but we are a happy couple. We're just, we have a 3-hour commute.
And I don't know if it's the irony or the karma of it all, is that I am from Philadelphia and I moved to DC during the COVID shutdown to live with Sheila. And then last fall, she got a job and she's in Philly. So
yes,
this is life.
Yeah, switch places. So thank you, Aisha, for joining us. As I said, you know, so many people will just assume that I chose you because you're my partner. I chose you because you are the best person to speak on this subject matter. And I know that you speak all over the world all of the time. So thank you for taking the time to come and join me at CSL, which is, my spiritual home. So first and foremost, how would you like to lead this off?
Yeah, so I just want to start with just a little grounding
Perfect,
moment. I
perfect.
know that we have had quite a bit of grounding, beautiful grounding led by Reverend Victoria and Reverend Darrell, and just want to continue the grounding because we are going to go into the ocean of trauma, and I think it's important that we ground ourselves. As a survivor, that's what's very important. So, one of my teachers in guiding ancestral spirit, Tony K. Bambara, wrote, "It is so much easier to be out there than right here." And I think about that a lot. And because unless we are sound asleep, we tend to bear witness to all that's occurring externally without being attuned to what's happening internally. And I believe that it is important that we bear witness to what's occurring internally and externally. Often, what happens externally is informed by what's happening internally. So, just wanting to invite everyone who feels comfortable, who's in a safe space, to consider either closing your eyes or lowering your gaze. So often our bodies arrive before our minds have arrived. So just want to invite us to kind of bring it all together in one, that we are just kind of gathering in this community, this virtual community, um, and staying connected in that way, and inviting you to find a comfortable position, if you're seated or lying down or standing, but just where you are aware of your connection to the earth, either through your feet on the ground, if you are able to feel your feet, or your sits bones in the chair or laying down, just really connecting and just remembering the profound gift that earth gives us, and that's the gift of gravity. And of course there are many times when through earthquakes and other things when it shakes, but overall, she's holding us here. And so just wanted to acknowledge that, and acknowledging you, inviting you all to just connect with your breath or sensations on your body, just really again bringing you into this present moment. Our bodies are always in the present moment. It is our minds, for a whole host of reasons, that take us from the past to the future, sometimes the present, but just to connecting with the breath as we connect to earth. And I would just offer some words. May we remember and honor the keepers of the teachings and practices that provide a sense of love and safety. I express gratitude for the Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples throughout the world, in the Americas, in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, in the Caribbean. It is the Indigenous peoples everywhere that have passed on their sacred teachings. And there are three things that I often invite people to consider when attending talks or meditation sits or anything. It's just three states of mind that can really be a hindrance, and they are comparing mind, judging mind, and fixing mind. When we are comparing ourselves to others, something that I do all the time, it really can be a dysregulating factor and destabilizing force in our lives. When we're judging others, that also can be destabilizing. And when we're in that moment of always wanting to fix, that we forget to invite beginner's mind, remembering that even when we know things, that we can always still learn. And so I invite you to let go of beginner's mind, judging mind, comparing mind during the time that we are here together. Um, and that is not to say that there may not be questions or even disagreements, but just to be open um, to this conversation as we create this brave space. I used to talk about creating sacred space, but I realized that before there can be sacred space, we have to co create brave space. So just taking a few more breaths in and grounding and connecting with our inner selves. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha. Um, so I'm just gonna it's just gonna be a very sort of casual conversation. I have a couple questions. I would love for you to share your work and talk a little bit about your journey. But before I get to your journey, I really think people may be asking sexual assault or sexual violence. What's that got to do with DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? And I know that you know that you have a very sort of I'm going to say unique perspective. And I would love for you to share when people ask you, well, like, what's that got to do with sexual assault or sexual violence? What would you say?
Well, there isn't anything, and I mean anything, that sexual violence does not touch or impact, from the state of world affairs, from sacred practices, from education, from employment, athletics, from all of it. That if there's we have to always think about sexual violence, and not just adult sexual violence, but childhood sexual violence. And in the context of DEIA, and speaking as a Black woman, um, I think that historically, I know historically that when we've talked about sexual violence in this country, in the United States, that the voices and perspectives and lives of Black survivors, Indigenous survivors, Latinx, Arab, Asian survivors, of trans survivors, queer survivors of all races, that they weren't the center. They weren't centered. That our voices and perspectives were not included. That when people thought about sexual violence, it was the victim historically, in terms of how people viewed it, as was a cisgender white woman. And definitely cisgender white women are impacted by sexual violence without question. So this is not an either or, but it is also that so are so many people from marginalized communities in this country. So if we're not bringing a DEIA lens when we're having these conversations, then it is inevitable that we will leave out those communities.
Thank you for sharing that. And this is called Love with Accountability, and we're talking about the healing journey. Could you tell us a little bit about your healing journey?
Yes, briefly. So we won't be here all day. Um, So I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and I also was raped in my sophomore year in college. I was not raped as a child, but I was definitely um, sexually abused as a child. And so I did not, in so long story short, it was my paternal step grandfather, and then there was also a family friend, the son of a family friend, who also molested me. And so that in both instances, and for with my grandfather, it happened over a period of 2 years, and the son of a family friend, it just happened. It only happened once, and he was removed from my father's house at the time. But with my grandfather, nothing was done at the time. I told my parents, and they didn't remove me from the situation, or did they confront my grandfather. So and I grew up, so basically I grew up learning how to love and care for the person who took the night away from me. And it's a complicated situation because I loved my grandfather, and in 2010, when he was at death's door, I played a very pivotal role in saving his life, and I would do it again. So, and there's just so much there that I just don't want to, it's not that I can't get into it, but I want to be respectful of time. And also, we're going to be talking about the anthology a little, I know a little later. And then my sophomore year, I went on a study abroad program and it was raped. And I always think that this is very important to share that less than 24 hours after my rape, I had consensual sex with another man. And I share that because so often when we hear that people have been raped, we always want to know, well, what were they doing, or what was going on, or if they, goodness forbid, if we find somebody else's DNA in their underwear or whatever, it somehow negates the rape. So and so it's important for me to say that I was raped one night by one man, and I had consensual sex another night. And that was a night, me really reclaiming, or trying to reclaim my body, at 19 years old. And I came home pregnant, unsure of who the biological father was. And I was fortunate to have a safe and legal abortion. This was in 1989. I do also want to say, because we've opened up where we said we're partners, I'm a lesbian, and I think that this is really important. I am not gay because I was molested as a child or raped as a young woman. That is often something where people are thinking or wondering, like, oh, is that why? And just really wanting to emphasize that when we think that, or even ask that, and there, it's understandable on some levels why people may think that we don't recognize that we're inadvertently saying something is wrong with your non-heterosexual identity, and I have to get to the root of why you're that way. And so I've always liked girls, liked boys too, but I liked girl all my whole life. And even if I didn't, let's just say I just started at 20. But the point is that the sexual violence is what we need to get to the root of, not my sexual orientation, not my desire. And I just think that that's so important, because when we think that we play a role in silencing those of us who have been harmed, raped, abused, molested by and either come out, or even those of us who are harmed in same-sex relationships, because there's so many stigmas. So it's just really important that we keep the focus on disrupting and ending sexual violence, and not trying to figure out why someone is queer, non-binary, or trans.
Well, thank you for that. And for the record, I never assaulted or sexually assaulted, and I am a very out and proud lesbian. So yes, that also proves the point that it really it's just the way we were wired, and proud of it. Um, so you mentioned a little bit about school and leaving school and all that, and so I know that the first part of your trilogy was No, the Rape Documentary, and I'm just connecting dots for people, let them know. So was that as a result of the rape, or you decided
Mhm.
I'm going to leave school and focus on this film? what was so important to you that you had to do that?
hmm And you know what? I didn't share that I left school. You just said that because you knew
Well,
it.
you
So
said
thank
you
you.
were in
No, it's
school
fine.
and
I don't. I'm just
you
saying.
were
You just
avoiding.
reminded me that I didn't share. So yeah, because I stopped at the trauma. I didn't even go into the healing journey. So that after my rape and pregnancy and abortion, I went to Spain. I accompanied my father to Spain for a nuclear disarmament conference in Vitoria-Gasteiz, Spain. And while I was there, well, I went to the conference and then he left and I stayed and backpacked through Spain. And while I was there, I'll never forget it, and I still have the journal entry. I was at the Alhambra in Granada, Spain, and I wrote that I am not going to get in debt over a degree. I will get in debt over a film. And so that was the end. So sophomore year. So I left school. And I thought I would go back. Like that was always the plan. I did not, but I thought that was the plan. It was just like, I'm going to do a leave of absence. And I had the just great fortune of connecting with Toni K. Bombara, the Black feminist writer, author, filmmaker, screenwriter. She was my teacher. She was my mentor and big sister friend. And when I shared with her about dropping out of school and my pregnancy and abortion, she said, "I want you to come and take a class with me at Scribe Video Center." And I said, "Toni, I don't have any money." And she was like, "I didn't ask you if you had any money. I asked you to come to my class." And that was spring 1990. And I actually had come out. That's when I came out in 1990, when I was 21. And that just marked the trajectory of my life. So when I started working on No, which was 94, so that I'm just skipping because we don't have time to go through every year. I didn't think that No had anything to do with me. Like No for me was, I wanted to help those Black women survivors out there. It had nothing to do with me. Myself and Tamara Xavier, the co-producer, like that was our work. And it is only through 12 years, 7 of which were full time, that I recognized and realized that in making No, I saved my life. And I want to acknowledge, I haven't had a chance to go through all the participants, but I did see that Joan Brannon, who is the director of photography of No and associate producer of No, she is in the room, and she's many other things, but I just shared that because Joan reached out to me in 1995, and she had heard about No through the poet Nikki Finney, and reached out to just express an interest in being involved. And Joan really transformed what that meant for me. She introduced me to, I mean, now we're in a whole nother level of technology, but to mini DV tapes. So I mean, it's just, and then I think, yeah, Joan was on every single set. We traveled across the country filming. So it was an incredible experience that I know has us bonded for life, whether she knows it or not.
Awesome. You always got to thank people. I appreciate
Always.
always. So since we're talking about No, can you share a little clip with us?
I can. So I guess maybe I need to I don't know, to unspotlight you to, so wait, let me set it up for, I'm going to, because out of respect for trigger warnings, and we will not be showing any testimonials. This is the last 7 minutes of the film that really focuses on healing and accountability. And my mother, who I think she's also here, I think I saw her, Dr. Gwendolyn Zahar Simmons, was also in the film, and so she is there. So I will share my screen, and I think we have to unspotlight you, Sheila, so I can share.
There you go. Thank you, Christine.
What's happening here?
It's,
Why won't it? What's going on? Okay. Technology. Let's try this again. Why won't? All right. Let me try it again. Have it all queued up. We did this before. Why won't it? What are you all seeing? What can you see, Sheila?
as you started sharing your screen, double click to enter full screen mode.
Okay, there we go.
I think the most important thing that a person can do in the healing process is to be patient with themselves and to love themselves through the process. God condemns, God opposes the violation that you have experienced in your life. God stands with you and understands that you have been victimized by sexual assault or by battery.
There are many things in the text, in the Quran, that are very affirming of women spiritually and of women's roles as agents for change. And this is how I am using the religion in support of my own healing and attempting to share the message through my writings and through my teaching.
It's not enough for someone who has perpetrated or violated another person to say, "Forgive me, God." Though as a minister, I know that must take place first. That the perpetrator would ask for forgiveness and repent, and that you would pray for them. But it also says faith without works. So now you have repentance, but now comes accountability.
And if the pastor gets up in church one day and say, "Suleiman, I know what you've done, and we're not going to tolerate that here. In fact, right now, we're getting ready to have a meeting with you right now, and clearly you've got to do some work around this." And it's acknowledged to the congregation that it's not pulling me off in some room on the side and having a little meeting with me, that the congregation is aware of it. You see, that's the community effort, you know? And when the boss calls me into his office and say, "I'm aware of what you've done, and I want you to know you can no longer work here until you've gotten some help around this, or until you're enrolled in a program, or you're doing something." Those are the systems that really need to be ignited and going to work around this, because those are the institutions that keep this stuff in place.
But I'm not sure that criminal prosecution and putting rapists in jail for the very short amount of time that they normally serve if they're found guilty is really going to stop rape, because we know that men who are found guilty of rape and convicted and serve any jail time come right back out and rape again. There has to be ways in our community that we address this. So I think sometimes outside of the criminal justice system or the criminal injustice system, I mean, we really need to think about it. And I don't know if we can afford to throw away particular people and have them locked up forever and ever. I don't believe in that. I do believe that people can change if they want to change. That's a question. You know, we have to ask Black men in our community, do you want to change? Are you willing to change?
We've got to get rid of these unbelievable fantasies and fallacious and outrageous notions about what's really going on. Well, she probably ended up liking it. Or, you know, if she hadn't dressed that way, it wouldn't have happened, which tells you she really wanted it. I mean, we've got to confront that. What does that mean? We've got to interpret that in our own behavior. And for young brothers and old men too, it means they have got to simulate that whole act and ask, is that what I want? Is that what I would have done unto me?
So I would think that men should realize that if 1 out of 3 women are raped in their lifetimes, then that can translate to 1 out of 3 men are going to date a woman or marry a woman who's been raped before, and who, if she hasn't had counseling, very likely is suffering from rape-related post-traumatic stress disorder, which can rear its head in all kinds of ways.
There was a period in my life when like at least once a year for almost 4 or 5 years, the place where I lived got robbed. And I mean, and the last time that I lived in a place that got robbed was maybe 20 years ago. I have just reached a point where every day that I come home, I don't look to see if my door's open. That was 20 years ago. And I wasn't at the house. There was nothing traumatic about me getting robbed. It was just that somebody took my stuff and I felt violated. But now I can't imagine an emotional trauma like rape, how long it takes to get over that. If I'm still nervous coming home just about whether my TV set is there.
The way out is to tell. Speak the acts perpetrated upon us. Speak the atrocities. Speak the injustices. Speak the personal violations of the soul. Someone will listen. Someone will believe our stories. Someone will join us. And until there are more who will bear witness to our truths as Black women, we will do it for one another. For now, that is enough.
Oh,
Okay.
awesome. Well, thank you, Aisha. I love that mantra. Rage, meditation, action, healing. And that takes me right back to our healing journey. So I don't even think we got to talk a little bit about the healing part. We talked about, how how we got to need the healing, but how do you heal? Was making no part of the healing journey?
Yeah, so let me say therapy. Let me start there. I started therapy in 1992. I worked with the same therapist up until 2020. And then in fall 21, I started working with a new therapist. So, excuse me, I can't imagine my life without therapy, and it's particularly working on no. I worked on no for 12 years, 7 of which were full time. And the reason why it took so long was economic censorship. Not It was not at the time. This film came out, the world premiere was in 2006. It was 18 months before the first sexual assault case was applied using Title IX. decades before the Me Too hashtag went viral, before Surviving R. Kelly, before The Hunting Ground, just before. And so as a result of the of being, groundbreaking in that sense, that people were not interested in the documentaries around sexual violence of Black women and girls. They were not interested in a film that really not only presented the problem, but also offered solutions that were Black survivor centered, and included the voices of Black men who were doing work to end sexual violence. So it was a lot of no's in terms of funding, but then there were some big and important yeses. So all of that, and I have to say that as a result of that long journey, and I don't recommend, and this is, we're talking, I mean, I was, when I started working on No, I mean, when Joan wrote me about No, it was a snail mail letter. We're not dealing with email, let alone social media. Like, that's what we were doing, snail mail, like mail, lick the stamp and wait a few days and see if they, and then it was a landline, hoping either that they have call waiting or an answering machine. So I just say that in terms of, it feels like I was making No in, the 1700s in comparison to where we are now in 2023. So therapy was integral. And then in 2002, I started what has become just another grounding anchor amid the groundlessness that life brings you, which is Vipassana meditation, which is my Buddhist practice. So when I wrote a choreo poem, A State of Rage, where the closing refrain is in the end of the song, rage, meditation, action, healing. I actually wrote that in the Tony K. Bombara script writing class in '94. I had no idea, that I was going to be doing meditation and dedicating a huge part of my life going to retreats and all of that. But that's exactly what it is. It was like the rage around the sexual violence, the horror, the meditation, right? To create the space for discernment, to create the space for not reacting, ongoing process for me, let me just say. And then healing, rage, meditation, action, and then healing. So in many ways, I feel like No led me to Dharma, trauma led me to Dharma. Like I was swimming, drowning, if not in the ocean of misery. And it was through my Dharma practice, along with therapy, along with being in community with survivors, with filmmakers who were committed to doing this work, with cultural workers, that has been an integral part of my healing journey. And I'm still, it's 2023, still healing the trauma, not my trauma, the trauma.
It's ongoing, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I let me go back a minute and say that's a very powerful film. When Janetta Coles said, or talked about men, would they have that done unto them? Super, super powerful. Super, super powerful. And I recommend everybody check out this film on Vimeo, and we'll put the information in the chat. But I just realized that was still playing in my head because it was such a powerful, powerful piece. And so that film is done. And I know this preceded the Me Too movement. And then and it's heartbreaking to hear how something like this would not be picked up. I know, just as a side note, from living with you, that putting to Aishah's things together when she was moving in with me, we found a letter from HBO turning down this film because of the subject matter. And then you think about today where we are with the subject matter, where is everywhere. It just shows that No, the rape documentary was ahead of its time. So
yeah,
I'll say to that. All right, so now moving on to what's next in the trilogy, Aishah, to continue that healing work.
Yeah. And I didn't say, I talked about my mom being in a film. I should say the man at the end, Michael Simmons, is my father. So just wanted to also acknowledge that. And
Mother and dad in there.
Yes, and I think that it's this important segue to the second. So there's a trilogy of work, and so the second is Love with Accountability, which so when I was working on No, and I mean I always said I was an incest survivor, always said that, and said I was a rape survivor, but I never talked about the incest while making
Mm.
No, ever. And there are a whole bunch of reasons that I'm delving into with this current project, but and I just think it's really important to say that, and so and to really talk about how do we hold all of the complexities, right? So if you have the opportunity to see the film or even just a little bit, you don't really get a sense of my mother in that little clip, but she has a very prominent role in the film in terms of her work during in SNCC and instituting the first sexual harassment policy during the Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964. You know, imagine that, instituting a sexual harassment policy in 1964 when she was 19 years old. So she talks about that and talks about a sexual assault that she experienced, and all of that in the film. I share all of that to say that my parents, I think, well, not only in just in terms of No, but just in terms of their work in the world, long-term um, activists and human rights, social agents for change, not only in this country and globally. And I shared that to kind of foreground, not kind of to foreground, just the complexities of it all, because they did not protect me when I sought help as a child. And so Love with Accountability is really turns the lens from adult sexual violence, which is what No really focuses on primarily, to childhood sexual abuse. And I have to say that my own evolution and understanding expanded and may it continue to expand. So when I made No, rape was something that only happened to cisgender women. That's what I thought, or that was what my focus was, right? Cisgender meaning that your gender matches, your gender identity matches what you were assigned at birth. I didn't really factor in that boys are raped, men are raped. I wasn't thinking about non-binary folks, trans folks when I was making No. So with Love with Accountability, that vision expanded, where I included and invited the voices of cisgender women, cisgender men, transgender men and women, and non-binary folks, diasporic, all Black, to write about and share about not only the trauma that they experienced, from the sexual violence, but also to think about how can we disrupt and end this inhumane pandemic that knows no boundaries and that is throughout the world. I'm only looking at it in the US, but just want to really be clear. Like when we were during COVID, talking about sheltering in place, children are always sheltering in place, pandemic or no pandemic, in terms of global health. And when they're being harmed, they're sheltering in place. So so Love with Accountability actually is something that emerged from my own spiritual practice. And I share that to say, um, I, at the time when I was really demanding conversations around recognizing the bystander role, my parents did not sexually harm me, but they didn't protect me. Sheila, I think you should put mute on. There's a background. I don't know. Yep. And so recognizing that. And so during the time of we were at a standstill, and my parents are divorced, have been separated since I was 4. We were at a standstill. And at the time I started sending communiques that said Love with Accountability. And that came out of literally a sitting as a meditation practice, where I really just felt like I was going to implode, especially because of who they are, right? Like these are people who have put their lives on the line for all kinds of human rights violations in this country and globally. My father was incarcerated for 30 months for refusing to participate in the murder of Vietnamese women, men, and children, known as the Vietnam War. My mother, they were jailed in the 60s for registering people to vote. I mean, so and then human rights violations in Europe and the Middle East, that this has been their work. And so for me, it was just kind of like, why can't we need to talk about this. And I'm not a parent, and I know that's by design, but I can't even imagine how it is that one can face how one did not protect their child. I do know what it's like when I have to really come to face with when I've caused harm to someone that I care about. So when I magnify that 100-fold, right, as a parent, I'm sure it is unbearable. And so during my one of my sits at home, I remember like literally just screaming, falling out, crying and sobbing. And the words just came to me, love with accountability. And that's how I started writing my communiques and all of that with them via text. And, and I don't want to act like this was just a passive love with accountability. No, I was enraged, and and rather at that point than understanding how to work with the rage, it was like throwing grenades in the form of words at my parents. So that's where love with accountability comes out. Sorry.
Yes, no, so that's my question, is just to clarify. So what you were saying was, I love you, but also holding you accountable each time you wrote them? Okay. Okay.
And and so that's how it came out. I mean, that's the term, and then that's been the work. That was the work in 2015. So we're not talking very long. And I was 46 in 2015. Yeah.
So how do we get to having 40
Well,
diasporic stories?
Yeah, it was I had the fellowship, the Just Beginnings collaborative fellowship, which was a fellowship, a 4-year fellowship for survivor leaders, predominantly BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer and trans, deaf, disabled survivors, who we each were working on our own individual projects, but in community with each other. And my project was Love with Accountability. So it started out as an online forum on the feministwire.com, where I was an associate. I mean, it's no longer really in print at all, but where I was an associate editor. And then that forum transformed into an anthology. I also want to say that my mother's one of the contributors, that she wrote about her bystanding role to the harm that I experienced, and held herself accountable in print in the anthology. Since all of that time, the three of us, as in my mom and dad, and I, have done a lot of processing, and it's been in the fire. And I just think it's really important to share that, and I romanticize it, and say that, it's still on the journey. But for me, I wanted to hear, one of the things like I did with No is I believe in the chorus, and I wanted to hear from the chorus of survivor advocates and activists really sharing. And I strive every day to be an abolitionist, because I know that prisons do not stop rape, and prisons don't make us safe from rape, and people are raped in prison, and 46% of the rapes that occur in prison happen at the hands of correctional officers. And so I am interested in, what does healing look like for survivors? What does accountability look like for harm doers? And so that was, for me, the invitation to the contributors. There are at least 3 or 4 contributors who did utilize the criminal justice system, and in their instances, they got justice in the ways in which we define justice, in terms of, the person who caused harm gets locked up. So when I say they got justice, in terms of they were able to get what they pursued. And I thought it was important to have their voices in there, because I think that while I strive every day to be an abolitionist, I also understand that there are many people who feel like I want to go through the court systems. And it's not often, when we look at statistics, that Black folks, especially Black trans women, get any form of justice. And one of the contributors is a Black trans woman who was actually raped by a police officer. And she was, her mother, as a young person, and her mother pressed charges, and the woman, the survivor, was won. And that's just so unheard of. With that shared, I don't know what that means for, for the officer who was incarcerated. And actually Janice, the contributor, explores that in her writing. It's just kind of like, when we think about how pervasive sexual violence is, how pervasive, and not only those who commit the acts, but then all of those who allow it to happen. Like, for instance, we focus on the high profile celebrities, right? All the time. And then for those of us can rejoice, oh, so-and-so got convicted in terms of high profile celebrities. But we don't think about, like, particularly the folks who are like getting convicted like 30 years later. How did it happen? And it's all the bystanders. And so we focus on that one person without looking at all the people who allow it to happen. And if we're really serious about digging up these roots, we have got to come up with new ways to hold folks accountable, not only the ones who commit the acts, but those who allow the acts to occur.
Thank you. So do you have do we have time for you to share something?
I just want to read a little something. And it's from, they're all dear friends, become friends. And I'm just going to read a little excerpt because we don't have a lot of time. And this is by poet Enina J. And her chapter is called "Whose Child Is This? She Is Mine." And so I will just, and I'm not going to read any anything that could trigger folks. I just want to be in this moment. So she opens with a prologue. When I received the email from Aishah asking me to be a part of the Love with Accountability online forum, my immediate answer was yes. It was unquestionable for me. I believe in Aishah's work and her intentions. I read the word incest. I read the word child sexual abuse, or I believed I had. It took me days, maybe even a couple of weeks, to realize that I may not have truly heard her. Having worked in rape crisis centers for over a decade, having written hundreds of poems about rape and incest, having performed at endless Take Back the Night marches, I thought perhaps it was possible that those words had become just words to me. Perhaps in order to do this work effectively, I distance myself from them in ways I'm not aware of. Perhaps I've become numb. I thought this at first, as I could not feel anything as I sat to write. That's what I told myself. I didn't feel anything. This wasn't true. I was afraid to, as the 2016 deadline approached, I felt anger. Why did I agree to do this? I didn't have time. I told myself I didn't have the patience. I told myself I had no idea what love with accountability means. I told myself Aishah was making me angry. She wanted too much. She's never satisfied. She's always pushing me. I told myself a lot of things except this truth. I was afraid to intimately engage the process because the person I felt the least accountable to had been myself, to the parts of myself that needed healing. For me, it's easier to focus, fight, and love another woman, a community, a society. It's not difficult for me to contextualize childhood rape trauma when I'm reaching to love somebody else. I deeply understand that I still live in myriad of silences. I still knowingly live in shame. So with the forum, I'd done what I've always done when dealing with childhood traumas. I just attached them to all the traumas and feel them together. At a point, it became clear to me that I was going to have to dig deeper. I was going to have to talk about it at the same time that I was loving and being accountable to myself. I wasn't sure I knew how to do that. I found this a stunning revelation. I told myself it would be easy. I'd simply walk into the room where I stored all the files related to my incest and grab something quickly. That's how I talk about it in my mind. It's easier that way. Sounds like business, almost clinical, controllable, contained. I expected that I would be able to just walk into the room and open a drawer, pull an old file out to send to Aishah, and simply walk back out of the room and close the door tightly. As the third deadline extension approached, I awakened in the mornings telling myself I was irritated with Aishah. The truth is, I wasn't irritated with Aishah. I was afraid. I was angry at her, though, perhaps for knowing me deeply enough to know I wasn't present. Even if she didn't have the words for it, I could hear her doing her work by the tone of her voice in her emails. She was struggling, perhaps hurting. It didn't sound like she was just walking into rooms and pulling files out of drawers. If my sister isn't doing that, how could I? I understood I was going to have to write, which for me meant jumping into a volcano, praying that I would be able to climb back out without getting burned alive. I wasn't certain if it would be possible. I had to decide it was worth the risk, and I've decided that it is worth the risk. Whatever fears I have about the kind of nudity this forum demands of me, it is an opportunity for me to face them and to reach toward possibility of my dreams for survivors like me. I believe that we are our most powerful when we are able to embrace every inch of ourselves. I believe our collective loving and healing lies in our ability to acknowledge who we dream to be, what has interrupted that dream, and who it is that we are now as individuals and as a community. I believe it is possible to turn pain into power, and this is not a metaphor. I believe pain unspoken can never be transformed into power, and true power can can be held inside the same hands as secrets. And I'll stop there. You're on
So,
mute, Sheila. Okay.
yes, that's okay. I was just saying, to myself. So, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And I'd like to point out that she was reading pages 72 through 74 when you get the book. Check that out. And Nina J is in this room with us tonight, people,
Oh,
as
wow.
is Aisha's mother, Gwendolyn Zahara Simmons, who, as Aisha pointed out, is also in the book. So
Yes.
maybe some other contributors. I got to look around. There's 42 contributors in this book. It is
I don't is I know Christy Phillips, who's Mel Phillips's wife, that she said that they were going to be there, and so Mel Phillips is a contributor. I mean, I wish I could. We did know we did. I was like, oh, there's so much from Love with Accountability, but just really, I'm really grateful for the chorus of voices. And I really, when you were sharing about Dr. Cole, Dr. Janetta Cole, former president of Spelman College, as well as Bennett College, and just received a great, huge award from the White House, well deserved, just trailblazing woman. That it is very powerful in terms of what she says, and no, very, very powerful. And just, I think, conversations with survivors like Mel and Ahmad Green Hayes, and other survivors, male survivors and stuff, just really recognizing how that it is so important that we understand that sexual violence impacts all humans, all humans. There may be some numbers that are greater than others, but as Audre Lorde, Black feminist, lesbian, mother, poet, says, there is no hierarchy in oppression, and so that it is really critical that when we are talking about eradicating this global pandemic of sexual violence, that we want to make sure that that no one is harmed, right? I mean, there are some cultures where boys are raped because of the whole fear of raping girls, in terms of hymens and all of that. That there's documentation of that. That doesn't mean girls are not being raped, cisgender girls, but there's boys are being raped, non-binary children are being raped, trans children are being sexually assaulted, those who are deemed as effeminate, whatever, boys or femboys or masculine girls. There's all this kind of way of trying to really kind of force children into roles that they gender assigned roles. It's just so much how rape is used as a weapon of, definitely, of war. We talk about in war, but just in terms of, but I'm using war in terms of the gender war, racial wars, what's happening in families and responses, what the stress and strain that people experience, and then how we take it out on children. So we have to just really be mindful that we want all children, all humans, to be safe from sexual violence.
thank you for that. I want you to know that the chat the chat line is blowing up with praise for you, and one of our committee members who's monitoring the chat will share if there's any questions. Aisha, we're going to take some time to ask some questions in a few minutes, so you can hold them, or you can put them in the chat, and wait a few minutes, and you'll get them answered. So we've talked about Know the Rape documentary. We've talked about Love with Accountability. 2 award-winning projects. So the obvious question is, what's next? You said a trilogy.
Yes, the trilogy, the final, the capstone to this trilogy of work is, excuse me, Love, Justice, and Dharma. It has evolved in terms of I mean, it was always going to be a memoir, but I'm very clear it's a spiritual memoir now. I've spent from, let's see, 1994 is when I started working on No, to 2020 is when like Love Accountability came out in 2019. So from those years, I spent a lot of time documenting, collecting the voices, the expertise, soliciting, learning from, and kind of keeping it, or creating it in No, in Love with Accountability, a total of about, I think, 80 or 90 voices of diasporic Black women and men and transgender and non-binary people who are really looking at sexual violence through their own lived experiences, through their work in the world. And while I would offer that I'm in these works, I really had not told my story in its totality. And so Love, Justice, and Dharma is the capstone to the trilogy that started with No. And so initially it was just going to be Love and Justice. And I brought in Dharma because I realized, I'm burned out. It's been 30 years almost of working on trauma on the front lines as a cultural worker, I'm not doing calls, but because I speak and talk about it all the time, I am receiving information from survivors and really wanting to think about what does healing look like through other avenues. And so for me, it's really been my Dharma mindfulness practices, as well as, of course, therapy, that's played a role. So with this new book, that what I'm looking at is really looking at certain teachings that have resonated with me to tell tell my story, and really working to tell it in a way that honors the truth as I know it, recognizing that there are multiple truths, but using it as a way really to invite people, readers, to look at the truths, the complexities, the contradictions in all of our lives, right? When we talk about harm, it's so easy to talk about the harm that so many people are doing out there, but it's really hard to look at the harm that we're doing, right? Not only to ourselves, but to each other, oftentimes in response to harm that we've experienced. So really exploring that, using my lived experiences. Because initially when I thought about the work, I was going to tell my story of traumas and all that, and I am going to share that, but I have to move beyond the trauma, and that doesn't, and so it's really to acknowledge the trauma, but it's just kind of like, how have I been able to keep moving forward, and really thinking about, because these are really, they're scary times. And then when I think about, as we, opened up with the land acknowledgement, what was it like in 1492? You know what I'm saying? Like, what was it like in the 1700s? And I share that not to deny what is happening in 2023. I just share that to remind us that it has been hard and all over, but we're in this hemisphere, and for a very long time. We're talking about over 500 years of colonization, enslavement, forced migration, and 500 years of resistance. And it keeps going. And in order for us to keep going, we have got to be well. We've got to take care of ourselves. In the words of Tony K. Bumbar, are you sure you want to be well? And so, and we live in a time, well, not now, but wellness can be viewed as like, kind of like, oh, that's just light stuff. That's not the real work. And it is the real work, because what I'm not interested in is becoming the very mechanisms, things that we are trying to dismantle. And I think that we run the risk of that if we're not accountable to each other and ourselves while we're doing the important work to disrupt and dismantle these very systems that are trying to crush and annihilate us.
And does that explain, you know, your deepening of the Buddhist practices that you've been going through?
Yeah, yeah, and it explains like really trying embodying it. You know, we can so you know it's so easy to spiritual bypass. It's so like so one of the things that I'm teaching at Morgan State now, and this is really a gift to be able to teach Black students meditation. And one of the things that I say, because I have experienced spiritual bypass in even my own lineage that I left in 2019. It's like it's so easy like to do, oh, just breathe in, breathe out, and it's going to feel good. No, meditation is not about this. It's not about feeling good. Meditation is really, it is about helping us to tap in and to really call on that inner strength within so that we can hopefully pause and discern about how to move, how to respond and not react. So I think that, this kind of myth of just breathing in, breathing out, there's some days when it's not going to feel good, and permanence is our continuous companion. It's the vicissitudes of life, up and down all the time, all around. And so it is only the craving of wanting things to always be good that really makes us miserable. And again, I'm not condoning any form of harm or bad things happening. We have to act in response to it, but we cannot act and be, in the words of the Lord, Audre Lorde, deliberate and intentional if we are moving through reactivity. And so meditation or prayer or just quiet time, if you're agnostic or atheist, just create space for us to just kind of really try to see what is happening in the moment and what is the best way that I can respond to it. And I speak as a very reactive person. So I have not arrived. I am on the journey of arriving.
I can attest to that. Yeah.
Thank you, Sheila. I love you so much. But no, I just think it's important because that's the other thing, like with meditation teachers or any teachers or clergy or whatever, it's this assumption of like, I'm here. So just because you're, and I think it's really important to be transparent in terms of saying that it's a lifelong journey of, of pausing and not reacting. It's a lifelong journey.
Woo, well, thank you for that. And so I want to leave a few minutes for some questions. So what you're saying is what's next is just sort of stay tuned for the upcoming.
Yeah, what's next is Love, Justice, and Dharma. That's next. I'm doing meditation work and teaching. I don't, because of time, and then the advice of my partner, she was like, don't read things brand new yet. It's not, wait till it's published or whatever. I'm not gonna read because we don't have enough time, but I was gonna read an excerpt from that in progress. But yeah, so it's that's and I think I'm inching to get back into the director's chair as a filmmaker. I have not, I've done a little things here and there, but no really wiped me out. And but I'm thinking about it. Yeah.
All right, you heard it here, folks. The filmmaker returns. Well, thank you, Aishah, for sharing with that. And
thank you, Sheila.
I saw one or two questions in the chat, but I think people have their hands raised. Let's try to see if I can go to the gallery view and ask you.
Yeah, no, you can look in the participant. You can see it if you go to participants, like Constance Chapman has.
Even better, right? All right. Yeah. So there you go. Constance Chapman.
Thank you.
You're first. Thank you.
I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and that because there's so much work that needs to be done. I did a lot of that work when I was about your age. I'm now a lot older than you, and the energy isn't there. But also, and I think, it's not that the interest isn't there, but it's a whole different thing in your 70s. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that there tends to be a societal belief that rape is always is violent, and I don't think that it's certainly not true for me. And it took me a long time to realize that I had been raised from a very young age with the belief that I didn't have a right to say no. And so that actually probably stopped me from being violently raped, but it didn't stop me from being raped. As long as someone approached me with even if I could somehow in my mind justify that this person might be interested in me other than sexually, I would say yes. And yet that's rape, because I really wasn't there. It was just something else. And I think that that's much more common than we believe it is. So I just wanted to say that is a societal belief that there is violence involved, and it's not always.
Thank you for sharing. In the film No, there's only, let's see, there's someone, in fact, that was one of the critiques of No, because it was most of the sexual violence that shared, most of the testimonies, people knew and cared about the survivors knew and cared about the harm doers who assaulted them. That there was only one person in the film where it was a strange man an unknown man who broke into their home. This was all acquaintance. And when I was started filming with Joan and Gail and Nikki and the whole crew, that in trying to raise money, that was part of the problem with funders, that it wasn't this kind of like strange unidentifiable man in the bushes. Even my sexual assault, it was date rape. I said yes. I paid for the hotel room in the country where it happened. So and then I got scared and changed my mind. So it wasn't like I was yanked off the street in this foreign country, not at all. So yeah, I think that plays a role in why people don't believe that people are sexually assaulted, because they may have participated in one form of sexual activity and said no to another form. And there's just this belief that once you say yes to one thing, that just is carte blanche until the harm doer decides that they're done, which it could be 5 minutes, an hour, a weekend, a week, whatever. So it's absolutely, I think it's absolutely correct. And so often, in a heterosexual framework, cis girls are really encouraged to not even want to have desire or not even say no. There are all these things that play a role, which is why it's so important. And Ignacio Hutia Shaiti Rivera in Love with Accountability writes about that, around the role of the way that we are going to be able to disrupt and end sexual violence is if we really do comprehensive sex education from the cradle to the grave, because there's an assumption that we all understand what sex is, what consent is, and we don't. And then we don't want to inform children, and there's an assumption that adults even understand, and that's not the case. So thank you.
Well, how do we do sex education in the country when no one understands what healthy sexuality is? It's like what we talk about is we have to have an understanding. We have to have come on, I'm losing my words. I'm a practitioner and I can't think. A mental equivalent. We have to have a mental equivalent of what it really is to have a society based on healthy sexuality, which we don't have. And so it's really hard to teach something when there's, as you were talking about, we do it to ourselves, we do it to each other, because there's so much that's still left there. There's incredible, I've done incredible healing. A lot of the healing came through my work with CSL and with working with a practitioner. And yet I know I still have stuff. And so it's really hard to know. I think we need to do it, but I think we have to recognize it's not going to be perfect.
No, it's definitely not going to be perfect. I always point to the work or the practices and beliefs of the Iroquois nation, where it's like everything that we do, we think about it for 7 generations. We live in a fast-paced digital age where we expect things to happen overnight. We got to think about long distance run. Like, definitely we want to, stop the hemorrhaging now, but in terms of real serious change, we got to think about the long distance run. As we opened up with land acknowledgement, this hemisphere, frankly, was founded on theft and genocide and rape and enslavement. So it is very much a part of the fiber. Again, this is throughout the world, but I'm just talking about where we are. So there's a lot of work that has to happen. And I think that for me, I'm interested in what is it that we can do now and thinking about future generations. And I mean, clearly the quick fix solution hasn't worked. So we have to it's like one block at a time while simultaneously stopping the hemorrhaging, but thinking long term. I always point to, I think about enslavement and, in terms of, I think about my maternal great grandmother who was born in 1898, Rhoda Bell Douglas, and who I knew, and she died when I was 25. And she was raised by her grandmother, who was a descendant of rape during enslavement. So she was raised, her grandmother was a slave. Enslaved person, excuse me. Her grandmother was an enslaved person. I shared that only to say that when I think about Grandma Lucy, who was like third grade, and I think about where I am, like in terms of just that time span, it's in terms of thinking about what can happen. So I'm thinking about I don't have any kids, but I have nieces and cousins, those generations in the future. I hope that one day that they can look back and go, wow, people did that to children, to people. And so that's the work that I'm thinking about while trying to work to stop the hemorrhaging, but long term.
Thank you. Woo, amazing. Thank you, Constance, as well for that comment and question. Aishah, let me see if we have any other questions. Otherwise, I know you wanted to share a closing meta with practice.
Right, and then there'll be another. Okay.
Let's see. Hold on. We don't want to cut anybody off. All right. I think
I didn't see any.
I don't see any raised hands.
Okay.
Hands or questions.
Okay.
I just mentioned that in the chat, Bettina wrote, we live in a blame the victim society. And I thought that was a good comment to share.
Yes. Thank you, John. I also thought it was significant, Aishah, when Dr. Janetta Cole was talking about how we often blame the victim or what he or she was wearing or not wearing. And that is such a valid point, years later. So I just think that the movie's timeless and resonates to this day, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I know that you all, CSL closes with a prayer, and I just wanted to offer a meditation short, just as in part of my spiritual tradition of really just any benefits that we've gained from our time together, just to be able to share those benefits with all beings everywhere and without exception. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings be free from enmity and danger and the causes of enmity and danger. And may all beings know love, joy, and liberating wisdom in this life, just as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Aishah, for sharing your journey of rage, meditation, action, and healing, and allowing us to see the possibilities through your heart, through your love, and through your abilities. We appreciate you.
That was Sharon from the DEI Committee, Sharon Mitchell. Thank you, Sharon. Anybody else, as we're just, just throw it out there. Anything you want to share, praise on Aishah. This is the opportunity. We got 3 minutes.
Thank you, Sheila. I want to give praise to you, Sheila. Thank you.
And Russ has entered a comment. Russ, did you want to speak your comment?
Oh, yeah, I was just saying thank you, Aishah, for sharing this time in your story with us, and thanking everyone who joined us today, too, for sharing and choosing to spend that time with us today. I think this was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I agree. I want to read you a couple of things that were in the chat that you may have missed. Joe Lasley said, "Thank you for the connection with you and what the loving vulnerability shared. Beautiful and touched my heart. Blessings to you all as I must leave now." Love that. Love it, love it, love it. So many wonderful statements and upliftings of your work, Aishah. So you know that I'm I'm your biggest fan. So it's a pleasure to share this with other people. Say that again.
I see Latanya. I don't know.
Oh, somebody have another comment?
Her hand is up. I don't.
Yes, I do. Hi, Aishah. It's Latanya Jones in Kentucky.
Oh my goodness. Hi.
Yeah. It's so good to hear you after all these years, and that this is still so resonant. And I love that you talked about the fact that this is a lifelong journey for survivors. It is not something that happened once and you just move through it. And over the last couple of months, for some work that I'm doing, I'm really thinking and considering and sitting with the fact that we don't grieve our losses collectively. And one of the major harms I think that has been done to the feminine, or that which society deems as feminine, is this sexual violence that we've not collectively grieved. And I think that conversations like this, it changed my life. It gave me voice as a Black woman to actually begin to talk about what had happened to me. And I've tried to do that over time. But what's not happened is the fact that of what we lost, and the fact that we can and need space for grieving it, and grieving it together, more than, saying it happened. I understand that with the Me Too movement, but we don't talk about the other side of it. And I also love your work and how it's centered in the fact that we know that just because you throw someone in prison, that's not healing. It's not healing for the one who commits it, the crime, the harm, and it's not healing for even the survivor if we even make it through a trial process. That trial process is also harmful to a victim who's trying to say what happened, and it doesn't leave any room for nuance or just the cultural impacts and the ways that we're taught that rape is okay, is actually what we have signed off on as a country who, like you said before, founded itself and things in that kind of violence. So I just want to be able to say out loud that your work is still resounding. It still touches me. I do have the book. And I'm just really grateful that you are continuing. And this was just a beautiful opportunity, and just really opened my eyes to maybe what my next work looks like. So thank you.
Thank you, Latanya. Good to see you through the virtual waves. It's been a long time.
Awesome. All right. Well, circle back and let us know when that next work comes out. All right. Awesome. Okay. Sharon, were you going to pray us out? No, yes, I can't me. Somebody.
Yes.
Okay. This is a good time. We're right on time, as it should be.
Breathing deep from the source of love that I am, my becoming, the source of all that is in every expression, experience, relationship, and opportunity. Divine intelligence, infinite potential, always available in real time, all the time, even when there is no time. We are empowered as co-creative expressions, as the divine pours itself into form, becoming the thing that it makes, from and with love. The energy of love is expressed as each of us. And in this sharing this evening, love is a focal point, being love with accountability. Love fills us up and overflows, expanding beyond any container. And this energy is more than enough to share and to spare, to enfold all here and anyone, anywhere, who resonates a request, either through intention or need. Breathe as the love. Expand the love by focus, and send this energy to where it is needed, where anyone's attention is focused elsewhere, and demand that love enfolds and holds all beings who may now recognize their divine wholeness. And I declare peace within each and every divine expression, every being, every community, city, country, the world, and beyond. This demand upon the law having been made, it is revealed under grace in perfect ways now. Knowing this is done in mind with joyous gratitude, I let it be so. We participate as co-creators in making it so. And together we say, and so it is, Ashe.
So it is.
Perfect prayer to a perfect show.
So it is.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Love it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing.
That doesn't say enough, but thank you.
Mm. I don't want to leave.
I don't either.
I know. I'm like, shall I leave? I don't know.
I know.
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. Be sure to look in the chat for the links.
I got it. Thank you. I wrote it down right away. Thank you so much.
No problem.
What a blessing you are. Oh, wow. You're exactly what I prayed for. I'm on a roll.
We did have a request to share the chat. And I didn't know if we could do that. Were we able to do that, Christine?
I copied.
Oh, you were able to copy it? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
People should be able to save the chat for sure. Yeah.
All right, people. That's a wrap. That was amazing.